Sports Day for Kia, the Kia Sorrento, Drive Car of the Year. And Red Energy, awarded CanStar's most trusted energy retailer nationally for 2021. That's Red Energy.
7 minutes past 6. Hello, welcome along to Sports Day. Well, tonight it's the biggest game of the round. Port Adelaide in fourth with 11 wins, but only one of them against the side currently in the 8th, Sydney. And, of course, a great win early in the season against the Tigers. And Melbourne second, who have beaten all the top contenders but have lost 2 out of the last 3 and been just going, in fact, almost ordinary for a month. Now, some have already written the Demons off, but they do so at their own peril. It ignores the very essence of a long year. It has its ups and downs, and better to falter in July and get it right in August for September. Ben Brown is in for the Demons, and Zach Butters and Tom Cleary in for Port. Also in Scoop is Phil Davis.
Oh, hello,
the co-host for the evening.
Gee, that's good
Out
news.
Tomlinson, in Davis.
I was about to say, it's good news for everyone in Australia, apart from Adam Tomlinson, because he's got big shoes to fill.
He has indeed. The mail I'm getting from New South Wales is that Sam Taylor may be coming in, so they've brought one tall in for Buckley. And I'm getting a little birdie, and hopefully Phil will be able to confirm this, that Jesse Hogan may be returning for the Giants. Which
you've buried the lead here. What about Canelio?
I would think it's pretty clear that if you're on limited minutes, that Canelio won't be playing. Now, it's a big story if he's in.
Big story.
But I'm not anticipating he'd be selected.
Hey, just before we get to Phil, can I just, a couple of things, Jared. Jamara Ugle-Hagan finally debuting for the Dogs against the Swans.
Been tightly held.
And often compared to Buddy Franklin throughout his juniors. Plays his first game against Buddy Franklin.
Oh, yeah.
The 6th debutant for the Western Bulldogs this year, who are
amazing,
top of the ladder. The only teams that have debuted more are Collingwood and Hawthorn at the other end of the ladder. So it just goes to show you that the state that this list is in.
Yeah, I think it was David King first put on the agenda that they are potentially on the cusp of the greatest era that the Dogs have ever had. And when you throw in a new debutant on the back of 5 others,
unbelievable,
and their quality, and they've got Sam Darcy coming through the door shortly.
204 centimetres.
Log out.
And also, Ash Barty playing in the semis tonight at Wimbledon. She's up against Angelique Kerber, the 25th seed. She's the 3-time Grand Slam winner herself, and she won Wimbledon back in 2018. So, all barracking for Ash tonight. Let's welcome Phil Davis. Phil, welcome.
Guys, thanks for coming. Thanks for having me and letting me come in.
Thank you for coming. He's got with the welcome to you, Jared.
Well, I must admit, I was looking for a stinger for him because we have a stinger for just about everybody else.
Yeah, he didn't have his own highlights package.
I should have sent it earlier, Jared. I'm sorry. I made one at home this afternoon and left it there. So, no, it's nice to be in here. I was a bit flat. I didn't squeeze it in the mug shot just behind you there, just in the little corner, a little pop-up.
Well,
you get your own.
These are the privileges that people in retirement have, Phil, so you don't want to wish that on yourself. 30 years of age. We've spoken about your career over the journey. How many more years do you think you've got in the game? I reckon halfway through the season you looked as if it was your last, but I saw you play last week and you looked like you'd got your spring back.
Yeah, I think I've probably... The frustrating thing was I felt like I had a really good 5-year patch, then halfway through last year got injured.
Yep.
And it just took me longer to get over it, really. Like I probably thought it was 4 or 5 months, took everything it got to get right for round 1, and then that really hit me for 6, and then missed a fit while. And I just think, once you get sort of a bit later, continuity is the king, and I just probably haven't had that, and played a month in a row now and feeling much better. So I'd like to think I've got 2, 3, 4 years left, depending on how long the mind and body stay sound.
Plenty of time to talk about the Giants and you in particular, but the numbers is 13-13-32 for the Harcourts open line. If you'd like to ask Phil any question on football, now's your opportunity. Harcourt's open line is open. 13-13-32. Can we delve into the Demons? You played them last week, you had a big win. Can you tell us about your pre-game strategy? Because there'll be a lot of Melbourne supporters listening to this, worried about where they're sitting, worried about how they're travelling right now. Is Ben Brown the right person? Have they got the midfield right? Should Petrarca be playing more midfield? But going into the game, you had a pretty good plan, clearly. How did you see Melbourne? How did you see it unfolding against the Demons?
Yeah, obviously Melbourne got off to such a great year, and I think you made a really good point before. You don't want to be in great form now. Especially if you're a good team, you want to be, clunking along and hopefully sharpen yourself up back end of the year. But for me, I look at Melbourne, they got off to such a quick start that their big name players were unbelievable for the first sort of 10, 11 weeks. And, for example, Max Gawn's the best ruckman in the game. We target him with Mumford, Mummy just loves that challenge. And then our mid just got to work because they create so much of their drive from their midfield. They play a lot of front half footy. And we were able to win the clearance battle, and that was a very big thing for us. And then on top of that, you've got to try to keep their backs in check. We probably couldn't quite do the best job on Salem. I thought he was very, very strong. But
did you have a person targeted for him?
No, we didn't. We sort of just went, Whitfield versus Salem, and sort of I think you could choose who won that battle, but I'd probably say Whitfield did. We were able to kick some goals.
So his damage was more damaging than
Salem's.
Salem's.
I think you end up making that call, and that probably also helped because we won the stoppage. Salem's getting the ball 50 out from his own goals rather than on the wing. And then I think what that did was we actually helped us control their forward line a lot more. I thought, their entries, albeit they had a couple more than us, I think, end up being pressured entries. And I think when you play a forward line like theirs, they want the slick movement, which they often get from Petraka and Oliver and Viney breaking from the centre and winning the clearance battle. So I actually personally think I really love Luke Jackson as a player. I think he's going to be a very, very good player. He's still young. So to me, when you've got Kazai Pickett nipping around and Spargo and Neil Bullen, to have someone else just to kick to, and we probably had more intercept marks on the weekend than probably Melbourne had given up for a while during the year, probably because of the pressure on the ball. And that's how I see Brown being really important.
Yeah. So what do you think Brown does tonight, Phil, for that makeup? Because Jared has talked a lot about the forward line makeup of the Demons in the last few weeks, and whether you're convinced, Jared, that Brown's going to be the right guy in that mix, or
I'm certainly not convinced, but I'm happy to be proven wrong, and let's see where he does.
You've talked about wanting Petrarca to spend more time down there than in the midfield, and I'm just interested to see.
I think somebody has to be deep. Now, I don't see Ben Brown as a deep forward. He's a deep starting forward, but he gets up.
Leads up very straight and hard at the ball, and for me, across my career, he's been a very difficult player to match up on. But I think if you look at our forward line, we've got sometimes have similar frustrations that we don't always have that big Tom Hawkins to bring the ball to ground. And if you don't have slick ball movement and you play against a very good intercept defending side, if your ball movement is not sharp, you don't get the ball to ground and give your smalls an actual chance. So that's always a challenge that teams have. And, we're fighting. And I think Ben Brown, I've always been a Wiedemann fan. I must admit, I haven't seen him enough to see why he's not playing. But, Ben will just be told, can you get long down the line? Can you cater for a quick kick in, bring it to ground, or mark it? Because he's still very, very capable. But Port Adelaide play a very unique system. They're playing 4 talls or 4. They don't have any big key defenders. Mackenzie's 193, Jonas is 192, Cleary's 192, Lee's 190. But they intercept mark as well as anyone. They work in this quartet or trio, depending on how many are playing. And they will springboard their attack. And I think Ben's job tonight will be, can I bring it to the ground to give us a chance? And Luke Jackson and Max, because Max has played 30% in the forward line this year, which has been a big shift too.
So if you're Port Adelaide, they haven't beaten anybody in the top echelon bar one. A win against Sydney, and Sydney have had some big wins against sides in the 8, but they're still probably seen as the weakest link in the 8. Richmond, they beat them when they were still regarded as a powerhouse, and for all intents and purposes, they still are, just having a bad run at the present time. Are they quality, or are they one of these sides that can beat those below them but can't challenge above? My personal feeling is I think they will re-emerge as a premiership contender if Butters and the like come through.
Yeah, I started the year deeply believing that they were the best team in the comp. That's where I sort of put Port Adelaide. I just thought they added Fantasia, which was another element to their forward line. I was like, okay, they're pretty much complete everywhere. And then the Alir one surprised me that I always thought Alir was a good player. He's been fantastic, especially that first 6 weeks was extraordinary. So I have them in my top sort of 3 or 4.
Okay.
The hardest thing is I started the year, I was like Richmond number 1, and then for me it was Port Adelaide, Brisbane, Geelong, sort of in that next group, and then I had the Doggies just below. Now the Doggies have obviously showed that they're in that next category, but if you're Port Adelaide, you'd be happy, but you also deep down know that at some point you got to turn the screws on a top 4 side.
Who would you have as the flag favourite right now?
Well, I think you'd give it to the Doggies.
Yeah.
I must admit, I had Richmond till 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, okay.
And then, if they don't finish in the top 6, all of a sudden, he's coming from 7th and 8th, and that's a bit further back.
If they don't finish in the top 8, maybe the Giants do.
Yeah, well, we'll take that. I'm happy for them to miss the finals and us make it. But I think, for me, for the Doggies, but I could mount a case for them. Like, I really like what Brisbane's doing at the moment. I think, if they get 2 finals at the Gabba, to me, that's 2 very, you're starting a step ahead of everyone else going into those games. So, and then Geelong, once again, if they can find a way to finish, top 4, top 2 in particular, and actually get a home final at Cardinia, they'll be all right too.
If you're just tuning in for the first time on Sports Day, the voice you are listening to is that of GWS. Can I call him a veteran? Are you a veteran yet?
He's 30. He's a veteran.
I heard that the other day, and it didn't sit well because I still think I'm 26, but you can go with it.
We'll go with star. Phil Davis, of course, the inaugural captain alongside Callan Ward of GWS. He's going to stay with us for the hour, Jared. I want to ask you about Stephen Cornelio. I don't think he's playing this week in the first. He certainly didn't play last week. He was in the VFL. How do you manage getting him back into the side with all these star mids around? We'll talk about that and more on Sports Day after this.
Sports Day for Kia, the Kia Sorrento, drive car of the year, and Red Energy, awarded CanStar's most trusted energy retailer nationally for 2021. That's Red Energy.
Welcome back to Sports Day. We are powered by Red Energy, awarded CanStar's most trusted energy retailer nationally for 2021. That's Red Energy and the Kia Sorrento. It is drive car of the year. Jared Healy, Sam McClure, and a guest co-host, Jared Healy, is Phil Davis.
And the teams are just starting to drop, Phil. We can tell you that
you're right about Jesse.
Jack Buckley is not there, obviously, and what a disaster that is with an ACL. But Jesse Hogan is back in. So too Matt De Boer, Sam Taylor, and Xavier O'Halloran.
Sam Taylor's come back quick, Jared.
Well, they need him back in because Buckley is out, so it's a pretty handy return for him. But Jesse Hogan is the real winner for me. Still think he's a generational talent that lost his way for 4 or 5 years. And I think, Phil, if you can get him back to your very best, I look at your team. You've got Cornelio still out. You've got a struggle trying to get him in. You've got De Boer in and out of the side. You've got a really good list again. And I know you've just snuck back into the 8, but there's no real reason why you should go out of the 8.
Yeah, I really like our draw for the next sort of 7 weeks because it's challenging, but if you're good enough, you get your spot. And I feel like we are good enough, but we've got to play more consistently. Like I think if you actually looked at our last 3 weeks, what we did to Carlton was, I thought, very comprehensive.
Yep.
And then we were comprehensively poor against Hawthorn. And then we were in Tasmania the week before, so we sort of went poor, good, poor, good. And that doesn't cut it. We need to figure that out. But I think Jesse's been a great story because the challenges and troubles he's had to face in the last 4 years have been enormous. Varied from his father to his own health and a lot of other things, and changing states, dealing with being in Perth, which sometimes isn't easy. We've got him over here. He hasn't put a foot wrong. When he's played really well. We're also trying to fix his body, which was sort of slightly broken when it sort of came.
Yep.
And I think we're starting to get some continuity there. And if we can get some continuity back end of the year, he makes us a better side. Whether he plays this weekend, I'm not sure. I haven't heard the final 22, but to me, it's more about him just playing, and that makes us just so much a better side.
You mentioned your inconsistency. You've been around the club a long time now, and you've been in the game a long time, and you've been in a club that's gone all the way to a grand final, and you've been to a club that arguably should have been premiers in 2016 from memory, went out in the prelim final. Tell me, what's your sense of why you've had incredible lows this year and you could be on the cusp of incredible highs? I don't think anybody's considering you a premiership favourite or premiership contender, but you put Cornelio and Hogan back in, Sam Taylor's back in, you've got 3 ruckmen, one's really old and 2 are really young. You've got one of the most powerful midfields in the game. You've got Kelly back to his absolute best as his Whitby. There's no reason why you guys can't contend.
Yeah, I must admit, I've really, really liked the team sheet at times this year and a lot of times this year. But yeah, that consistency's eluded us, and I think it's just taken us a little bit of time just to really find the balance on our team. Like, I think you can be I think we've touched on it before, like, we've had too many mids at times. We've played, we've had to jiggle our side. And I think now we're starting to get to a point where it's really nice and balanced. And also people know exactly what they need to do. And that's the key. And then if you can judge them on that, plus have selection pressure, players need to do that and they need to be consistent.
Has there been a light bulb moment through the season, though? Because you were horrible in Perth against Fremantle. I was there for that game, and it looked as if the club was imploding, as if people didn't want to be there. But right now it looks as if everyone wants to be there. And everybody's playing for each other.
Yeah, I think what happened was we went to Perth. We had a great first quarter against Melbourne and Canberra.
Yep.
Had all these injuries, the boys hung tough. And then we had this period of 6-7 weeks where we were really young and the young brigade led energy and effort, and it's dragged it. And I think it's taken us all the way to this point now where there's this nice meshing of players coming back, plus the young players. Like I play in a backline now that, outside of Haynes and myself, is very, very, very young. But they're pulling the weight and, if anything, leading the charge with their desperation and competitiveness.
Phil, how does Toby Green's leadership vary to Stephen Cornelio's, and how does it vary to yours?
Yeah, I think the thing about Toby is he's obviously, for me, one of the best players I've played with in terms of
talent.
Yeah, and the hardest thing in footy, apart from a kick inside the forward half and that decision, is winning your own ball in the forward half. There's not many players can just win their own ball in the forward half. And Toby, to me, is top 3 in the comp at winning his own ball in the forward half, which separates himself from everyone else. Because when you need a big moment, like he had a one-on-one with Hibbard in the third quarter just to calm the game down. It takes a one-hander with 2 people around him, and he kicks the goal. So you sort of have those. He can step up in the really big moments, can win his own ball. And then he also plays with this ferocity that's infectious. And I think that's where he leads. He's like, come on, boys, follow me. And I think for him, his next step is, can he, continue to teach other people how to become better players and better professionals, and then, start filtering that through his week to make that, a more well-rounded thing. But
do you think he could be captain next year alongside Cornelio?
Oh, I think we'd have to cross that bridge when it gets, because Stephen's still our captain, and I've actually seen improvement in Stephen. I actually think the time he's been out, he's shown him enormous improvement with his ability to communicate, teach and learn. Because I think sometimes last year in that confine, you get so absorbed with what's next. He sort of was chasing his tail from a performance point of view, which made it really difficult. While this year has had this break. And he's put in a lot of time into that side of his leadership, that coaching, developing, nurturing Monday to Friday stuff, which he's had to do. And that's been really, really good for him. In terms of how it looks next year, I think at the moment, we've been very fortunate that Toby's done a terrific job in his place. But, once again, Toby hasn't had the demands of Monday to Friday because Cogs has been doing such an enormous amount of work Monday to Friday. So
that's the reason it feels like to me, Jared, that it could work as a co-captaincy. I mean, co-captaincy for the Giants has worked for a long time. And then things started to falter when it went to an individual captaincy, and now it feels like that there is a co-captaincy happening, even though we're not talking about it. That's what it feels like to me, anyway.
Well, I think one thing you got to be really careful about, and this is probably something that we didn't do great last year, is that I always view it as that lots of information comes in, and it's the size of the funnel. So when you've got 2 captains, you can absorb a lot more. But once you go to 1, if you keep it the same size, it can become too much. So we never knew anything differently. And I think maybe that didn't help Stephen, was that he was expected to potentially deliver on what Wardy and I were delivering together. And that's something that, potentially could have made it challenging. Now, it's more refined. He understands what he needs to do. And we're just looking forward to getting back and playing well.
One more question for me on the Giants before we move on to bigger issues, and there's other things coming along through the show. But the Giants are always under this umbrella of who's going to leave next year. The club's sort of fragile. It would appear as if it's got this air of fragility, even though you've been, high-end performers for a long period of time. But it seems to me just this last few months that's settled a fair bit, and yet you've still got Hopper out of contract, and you've got, I guess the big one is Josh Kelly, who's signed a big deal but can pull the trigger and bail out, which would be a disappointing signal in many respects after Jeremy Cameron left last week. Do you feel as if there's a slight shift in that, and that people are staying for the want of staying rather than staying because they're being paid more than they would elsewhere?
Yeah, I think there are 2 factors at play, and one is, I think as you're in the competition longer, the roots become deeper.
Yep.
When you get people up, the systems are better. They want to, and they all of a sudden want to stay more, blah, blah, blah. And the second one is, we had so many first-round picks at the start that, the salary cap plus the limited amount of talent elsewhere in the competition meant that we were this big beacon of, here's talent, come and steal us because the salary cap's going to stop us, let's pay overs, blah, blah, blah. And that slowly stopped down. Yes, we've been very fortunate in the draft. Last year we had 3 first-round picks. We've still got a lot of first-round picks, but it's more spread out, and I think we've been able to, control the salary cap a little bit better. But that first point, linked with that, means that's been a little bit easier per se, but we've still got a lot of good players. I think maybe Flynn's out of contract this year as well, so still some good players that we have to keep. But you feel far more comfortable that you can keep them.
Yeah, the world hasn't fallen apart because Jeremy Cameron has decided to leave. Will you stay in Sydney? You may have a career in football, so that means you probably, like everyone else, has to move wherever that takes you. You may have a career in media, so that means you may have to come to the epicentre, or you may be able to do it out of Sydney. Or do you think you'll stay a part of the club? Because in many ways you've been synonymous with the club. Yeah,
it's been an enormous part of my journey. And I guess for me, I now view Sydney as home, coming from Adelaide. My whole life's been in Sydney, really, in terms of like the big ticket items. So I'm very flexible in terms of, you know, where I go next and what that looks like. But there's no doubt that, you know, for, you know, decades to come, I'll always be, you know, a giant and having to work out, you know, can I help if they need it?
And he's had to leave the new pup at home, Jared. As soon as he had a new pup, COVID hits and he's got to move. So
yeah, a little Grudel, Jared, and it's
Grudel, like
it's
it.
Very I love him. He's a
name
Wally.
Wally.
Yeah, so I've
Wally Davis.
I've let Greta and Wally at home, and he was a bit a naughty pup this afternoon, so I got a bit of a distress phone call.
Oh no, Jared's phone's going.
Questions
off as well,
just come through.
Yep. And
do you see yourself as a senior coach? At some stage.
Yeah, I often laugh about this because I'd love to do it, but I'd only do it for 2 years. Because I think this is actually a serious issue. I think what's expected of senior coaches is too much. And I think eventually what's going to happen is some of the best minds in football will have the opportunity to do it, but will choose to do something else.
Lee Matthews he's almost said this weekly, but no one wants to listen to him about this, and that the senior coach is not the person who all the daggers should be thrown at because he's a leader of a group of coaches. And yet they're still living in a world where I think people view them as the be-all and end-all of the senior of the club. Yeah,
I think, you know, the head of football and the senior coach have got such an important role because there's too much if you just leave it all up to the coach, and it needs to be, you know, dispersed evenly to the coaches to help. Obviously, everyone likes the fact that it all can point back to the coach, but I've also been really big on recently is I look at all of our senior coaches around the competition. Unless you're extremely senior and experienced, like an Alistair Clarkson per se, you need a very, very senior and experienced head of you know, assistant coaches or a GM of footy. Like, I think Melbourne have had such a huge improvement. They've got Alan Richardson and GM of footy, and they've got Mark Williams, head of development. So Simon Goodwin, who's still a young coach, has got two very strong pillars that can pull him aside and say, hey, maybe you're losing sight here. Are you thinking about this?
So who's Leon's, Phil? Because they had Wayne Campbell.
Yeah, and then
Matthew Nix as well, and they both left.
Like, to me, like, I look at our best year as 2019, and we had Matthew Nix. And I don't think that's necessarily a coincidence because I think senior coaching is such a tough gig that to have someone that has initiative and the authority to go and do what they want, and maybe just do something that the coach hasn't even thought of. Because the funny thing about, you know, this is even when I was a captain, when you actually delegate, having to think about delegating, you've done half the job as it is. You might not execute, but to have someone that just says, hey, Phil, I've done this already. Awesome. I don't even have to think about it. I don't have to waste energy on that. And so when you've got those senior people around you, like, I think one of the best combinations is Ken Hinckley and Michael Voss. Ken's had a lot of experience, but then he gets Michael Voss, who's done it as well. And I just think that it's such nice synergy. You said you do the coaching if you could coach for 2 years. If you were a senior coach for 2 years, but you had to coach a side currently not in the 8, with the exception of Richmond, who would that club be that you reckon you could take to the top 4 pretty quickly? Carlton. I really like Carlton's list. Yeah, I think it's hard to get a great key forward, a great key defender, and a great midfielder, and they've got Wiedering, Walsh, Mackay. And De Koning coming through, but don't tell this man he's battered and busted. And
with the media the way it is at the moment, that headline will be written up into Davis wants Teague's job. More Sports Day coming up with Phil Davis
tomorrow morning,
including all the teams after this.
Sports Day for Kia, the Kia Sorrento, Drive Car of the Year, and Red Energy, awarded CanStar's most trusted energy retailer nationally for 2021. That's Red Energy. It's time for the teams. Thanks to Sudox Active, muscular and joint pain relief cream. Follow the directions for use.
Welcome back to Sports Day. Jared Healy is here. Phil Davis is the guest co-host for the night. The teams are in. Just a little bit of feedback, Jared, from directed towards you from Adam Tomlinson. He didn't like being referred to as being an out. He thought you were referring to him as being omitted. He'd like to tell you he's been managed.
Okay.
So he's coming back.
Too.
Zach Jones is back for the Saints. Joel Selwood has been managed by Geelong, as has Luke Dalhouse. Quinton Narkle has been dropped again, and we know Jeremy Cameron is already out. That's quite the list of outs, it must be said, for the Cats. They gain Asada Radaglia, Mark O'Connor, Sean Higgins, Carlton, Zach Williams in for Tom Williamson, who's been dropped.
Are you going to change your tip?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
Why would I be changing my tip? 110 of the last 12 against the Blues have the Cats. Denver Granger Barras is back for the Hawks. Matt Parker and Sydney Stack named on the extended bench for Richmond. Pat Lipinski and Toby McLean are both dropped by the Western Bulldogs. Jamari Ugle-Hagan comes in for his debut. And Zach Williams, as I mentioned at the top, is back for the Blues. Jared.
Well, there's a couple of good ins and a couple of good outs. You're very keen, obviously, on the Blues. How have you seen the discussion in and around Zach Williams, a former teammate of yours?
Yeah, I always think it's funny whenever someone goes from like Sydney to Melbourne, the spotlight's always a little bit brighter. Zach was never the pre-season specialist, even up in Sydney. Obviously, he's not a naturally gifted aerobic athlete, but for us, we sort of always played him in sort of that half-back role and then pinch hit in the midfield. Like he played about a half in that prelim and was just outstanding.
That's surprise. Yep.
And I just think, for me,
upon that performance, I think he was recruited as a midfielder.
Yeah, and I guess I see all the attributes that I love in a midfielder. He's dynamic. He's a great ball user, great decision maker. And it sounds like he couldn't quite get the pre-season under his belt that he would have liked. But where his aerobic level can get to play at AFL level, because it is brutal in there. Those midfielders work really, really hard, is yet to be seen. But to me, he was, for me, one of the really great players I got to play with, and I've got a huge amount of respect for him as a player.
Mids are good, Jared, but the key backs are the ones that win games, aren't they?
And they get paid accordingly, Sam, which is not anywhere near what the mids get paid.
Never quite considered the defenders like that, but...
More with Phil Davis after this.
It's time for a Bluebet odds update. Bet same-game multis with Bluebet. Download the apps today. Gamble responsibly.
Round 17, and what a blockbuster Thursday night footy we have with Bluebet. $1.74 in the head-to-head for Port Adelaide. They're in from $1.80. $2.10 now the Demons with 3.5 start. Check it all out, bluebet.com.au.
Bet same-game multis with Bluebet, the true blue Aussie bookie. Download from the App Store today. Gamble responsibly. Sports Day for Kia, the Kia Sorrento, Drive Car of the Year, and Red Energy, awarded CanStar's most trusted energy retailer nationally for 2021. That's Red Energy.
Welcome back to Sports Day. Jared Healy and Phil Davis both in studio. The teams, starting from tomorrow night, Essendon, Adelaide. Gleeson in, Ham's been dropped. Dyson Heppel missing a week with a thumb. In for the Crows, Himmelberg and Murphy. Out go Haitley, Brown and Walker. Jared or Phil, you stop me if you want to talk about a player or a team. Brisbane Lions taking on the Saints. That's at Metricon Stadium because of COVID. Madden and Neal, so Lockie Neal is back. Jared Berry out with that injury. Jackson Pryor, the medi-sub. Reece Matheson, the barometer, has been dropped again. Zach Jones is in for Josh Battle, who's been dropped, and Jack Higgins is injured.
Can I ask you about Brisbane, Phil, and just where you see them at?
Yeah, I just think they're in my top two at the moment. I just think they're just going really, really nicely. They're very well balanced. The only thing is when with Matheson's there, you've got a little bit of depth, but if they, just that midfield is so good.
Can they cover off Harris Andrews?
Yeah, that would obviously be a big loss.
He's out for 4 to 6. It's a hell of a hole to fill.
Yeah, I guess during that period you're sort of just trying to scramble a little bit just to survive, but. I really like, Marcus Adams is having a really, really good year. Young Payne's having a good year too. So I think they've got some, and also they've got Dan McStay, who I think could flick back if they needed to too.
Carlton and Geelong. Williams in for Cottrell and Williamson, and the Cats, Radaglia, O'Connor and Higgins in for the injured Cameron, the managed Selwood and Dalhouse, and the dropped Narkle. That's at 4:35 at the MCG, the twilight game on Saturday. Hawthorn Fremantle. Well, Clarko, in brackets soon to be Mitchell, have swung the axe. Granger, Barras, Jekka and Brockman are in for the dropped Greaves, Newcomb, Hanrahan and O'Brien. Geez, O'Brien's nearly taken mark of the decade and been dropped a couple of weeks later.
That was very, very, very big. I was front and square. That was enormous.
Was that over your head, actually?
No, I turned around and it was on Jack Buckley's head and it was massive.
Fremantle, Bailey Banfield in for Bewley, who's injured, and Crowden, the Medi sub. And then the Giants and the Suns, Jared. It's the big franchise game in Ballarat where it might be, I'm not sure what the forecast is, Weatherman Healy, but
I believe it's going to be
cold.
Well, it's always going to be cold in winter, but I believe it's going to be reasonably good weather during the day after a very cold start.
Well,
with perhaps a bit of moisture late.
It's the 12:40 game, so they're trying to get the peak heat, I think.
Yeah,
Hogan,
peak heat.
Hogan, De Boer, Taylor and Hanrahan in. Good to see Sam Taylor in. Unfortunately, Jack Buckley with that shocking knee injury is out. And for the Suns, Graham, Greenwood, Atkins and Smith in for the injured Josh Corbett. These are just squads at the moment. Jacob Hopper playing his 100th game, Phil, who I think is he out of contract still? I think he
Hopper is, yes.
Yes, no, he is. That's one of the best 100 games I've seen.
Come a long way again this year, hasn't he?
To me, I think he's an All-Australian midfielder.
Yep.
I think he
doesn't get discussed like that.
No, he doesn't.
His efforts have been
leading your BNF?
Yeah, leading our BNF. It'd be him 1, Toby Green 2, Josh Kelly 3.
Yep.
And no, Hopper's just. I actually think for a bloke as hard as he is, his skills are very, very good. He's a great kick of the ball, and the things that he also does, his pressure is very good. He tackles really well, creates spillages and the like. But yeah, sometimes I feel for him because I feel like he's right in the top echelon of midfielders and doesn't get talked about enough.
Well, you've run a couple of successful campaigns. Well, at least they're gathering steam. One of them is about young Tom Green.
Yep, he'll be NAB Rising Star, yep.
Is there any danger that you might just tell your coach to leave him in the team? It may help your campaign a little bit.
Yeah, I wonder if the Rising Star's ever been dropped during the year. But no, I think obviously...
What about twice?
Yeah, I think sometimes... It's hard to sometimes it's hard to see, but as I said to you earlier, Jared, sometimes our balance is just starting to get better, and we made a decision that we wanted to tag, and unfortunately that meant a midfielder had to go out, and Tom was the unlucky one because when you're choosing between Hopper, Taranto, Kelly, Ward, it's hard to work out the pecking order there at times. But I think we'd all be slightly surprised if Tom missed again this year.
You wouldn't have won last week had he not been in the team. His last quarter was as good a last quarter or as good a quarter as I've seen from a kid for a long time.
Yeah, it's always nice when those young players come in and they don't only just play their role, they can exceed it. And he's just so clean. And I've talked about it a lot, but some players just have it with that cleanliness, and it separates the great players from the good players. He just stands above, and there's obviously a fair bit of talk about him, but I already think he's tracking along really nicely for a great career.
We've only got 30 seconds. How's AFL footy tracking in Sydney?
I've noticed an enormous shift in the 10 years. The only thing I would say is that we can't not keep investing there. I think it's, obviously you were a bit of a trendsetter way back in the day, Jared, and it's projecting like it's going to get better and better, but we can't run away from it, and people just think that the job's done.
You got a contract for next year?
Not yet.
Okay, working on it?
Always working on it.
Okay. Phil, great to have you in. We'd like to sign you exclusively to our own radio contract and not go on other stations if we can.
Just have to talk to Alison Zell, our media manager.
Okay. I have to put
there she's out the back. She's saying thumbs up. Oh, thumbs up.
Thumbs up. We've got the
thumbs
deal.
Up.
Terrific.
Nero's just giving
Managers should work harder than that.
Good luck at Mars Stadium, Phil.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Sports Day for Kia, the Kia Sorrento, Drive Car of the Year, and Red Energy, awarded CanStar's most trusted energy retailer nationally for 2021. That's Red Energy.
Sports Day, we're building up to the 7 o'clock news, and thus, Jared, as we have been talking about tonight with Phil Davis, we are building up to the biggest game of the round. It is Port Adelaide versus Melbourne, but we thought we'd just go local just before the 7 o'clock news, and we've been celebrating that the TAC have got their 30th year milestone supporting community footy. Jared, there's a chance for also Victorian clubs to earn up to 10 grand by promoting road safety. And we've been talking to one very special guest the last couple of weeks, and I think success has been following him around.
Wherever he goes, victory follows. He's at the Redan Footy Club in Ballarat tonight, and it would be a shade on the chilly side, I've got to say. Wayne Swash joins us. You're going to have to fire them up, Swatter, and I hope you haven't got a long sleeve jumper on.
Jared, I've got a long sleeve. I've got undergarments.
You got the layers
I've got jackets,
on.
I've got The further I went away from Melbourne, the closer I got to Ballarat, the temperature gauge was heading in the wrong direction. And Redan will get 10 grand. If I was in charge of that footy club, I'd put in the best heating system possible. It is cold up here, boys. Cold.
Well, I know it was 1 degree this morning. I did a radio interview up there this morning. It was 1 degree as the sun came up early this morning. So it's probably not that much now that the sun's gone down. What's the number one drill tonight, Swatter?
Circuit work, Jared.
Good.
Circuit work last week. Work this week when I was at the Brunswick Renegades in the Knobs Footy Club. Not taking on fourth this weekend for Redan, so it's a challenge, but I'm confident that my inspirational talk will get them up and over the line.
I love it when you get flexible with your drills, as you said, with Kanga Kennedy. You go circle work clockwise, and just to mix it up, you go anti-clockwise.
And we'll do it for an hour and a half, and we'll be good.
Schwatter, a tip before you go for tonight's game, Port Melbourne?
I'm going to favour Port Adelaide, Sam, just because they're playing at home.
Okay, Schwatter going the way the bookies are. Good on you, Schwatter. Schwatter there at Redan Footy Club in Ballarat. He sounds like he's getting cold. All right, Jared. You got 15 seconds. Who wins and why? And by how much?
I won't give you the why.
Okay.
I'll just give you the who wins.
Okay. And?
I think Melbourne win tonight. I think Melbourne are a better team than Port Adelaide.
Yep.
If they can just break even through the middle of the ground, then I think that they can get the job done.
You got a margin for us?
The margin will be somewhere between 0 and 25 points.
Okay. I just hope that Nicola knows that it's the Demons playing, not the Bullets. We're going up
Don't
to
finish the show talking about a cho, for goodness sake.
Sorry, Jared. Enjoy Thursday night footy, everyone. We'll see you next week.